Welcome back to Rant and Rave. In today's video, we're going to be looking back at the Tommy Fury Jake Paul fight. 750,000 pay-per-view buys sold. So that was quite a decent performance from that. But we'll be getting into all that and more throughout the video. Dave, how you keeping, pal?
All good, bro. How are you?
Yeah, listen, I can't complain, as I always say. Who would listen? Just so you're filming these back to back, but
Still good, are you?
yeah, I'm still tipping away, you know. Obviously, split decision loss for Jake Paul. Came into this fight very, very confident against Tommy Fury. Both fighters were undefeated. Coming into this, Jake Paul was 6-0. Tommy Fury was 8-0, I believe. And the kind of big thing around Tommy was that everyone he was fighting before this were kind of bin men and lorry drivers. And I think the combined record of the people he'd fought was like 20 wins and 6,000 losses or something.
Crazy. I actually seen the stat. It was like 220 losses up to like 15 wins or something mad.
Crazy, like yeah. Whereas Jake Paul is notoriously knocked out the likes of seasoned boxer Nate Robinson.
In a Nissan Gibb, what a fucking
So good.
fight.
He was probably maybe the best out of the lot, to be honest.
Yeah,
Who else would it be? Ben Askren, who was just back off a hip replacement. It's actually crazy looking back at all this kind of stuff. If you compare to even throw a punch, I think I would actually genuinely fancy my chances against Ben Askren in a boxing fight.
It's fucking terrible boxer, honestly. Like
I'll probably go to decision, like, but
honestly, 100%. Like Woodley was the only one where I was like, actually, like, wow, that's actually a good knockout. Like,
yeah.
But other than that, they've all been kind of shit fighters or shit boxers.
That was because he's fought. That was the second fight that he
Second fight, yeah.
Like the first fight was like a decision, and it wasn't that impressive, really.
He nearly got floored at one point as well.
Woodley, I think it would have been a knockdown if it wasn't for the ropes that kind of helped him stay up. And then, of course, he did beat Anderson Silva in the most recent fight before this, which is actually definitely the most impressive win of the lot, in fairness.
Yeah. And he knocked him down, so that also was impressive.
Yeah. But it does have to be taken into account that Anderson Silva,
47,
nearing nursing home age.
Yeah, properly, like.
No disrespect to one of the greatest of all time. But yeah, he probably shouldn't be fighting at this stage. Like,
no, definitely not.
Especially against 25-year-old people that can definitely, Jake Paul can bang, like no two ways about it. He can bang.
Oh, he could hurt him, yeah.
But yeah, about this fight, going into it, who did you kind of predict to be winning, and what was your kind of general thoughts going into the fight before you'd seen anything?
I think I was just trying to like go against the grain a little bit. I know obviously Tommy was favorite, if I'm not mistaken. Or was Jake favorite? Jake was favorite, maybe, actually. Let's say go against the grain. I just remember asking a few of the lads and asking my brother and stuff, and they all said, I fancy Fury to get it done because he's a Fury and all this type of thing. So I fancy Jake to get it done. I think I was just kind of a part of the hype train. Like, not that I like back him that heavily, but I just thought, considering he looked decent against these guys that obviously aren't boxers, MMA fighters, and I just thought he could get it done against Tommy, given the fact that Tommy's record is a little bit padded. He's unbeaten, but as we said, like, just fighting fighters that can't win fights. So I just fancy Jake to get it done, but I think Tommy definitely looked like a proper boxer, if you want to call it that. And yeah, he looked better throughout most of the rounds, so deserved win in the end.
I actually kind of wanted Jake Paul to beat him. I just kind of wanted it to kind of continue on. That kind of like just that bit of shithousery and stuff. And the Furies kind of annoy me a little bit as well. They're just they're just kind of egregious. Like, they're just not like they say one thing and do a complete other. Like, you can't take them for their word at all. Like, they're just complete liars, and just so hypocritical at times and stuff. And it just annoys me. Like, did you see the stuff with the contract? To see all that. So basically, Jake Paul said to Tommy Fury, if you think you're going to beat me, sign a contract and I'll double your purse or something. And Tommy Fury didn't sign the contract, but after the fight, they want the money. Like, they didn't sign the contract.
Going along us Furies, like, our word is our bond and all this type of shit. Come on, like,
absolute wafflers.
And the funny thing is, Tommy didn't want that contract until he won the fight. Like, when John says deal in the press conference,
face turns around,
and you knew straight away, like, he was just thinking, no chance.
Then just going into like the kind of the fight itself, then obviously, like, it was kind of clear to see who'd been fighting since they were 9, 10, and who took it up like 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it is at this point. and it was clear to see. But do you think, like, obviously Tommy was the better boxer on the night, and it's clear to see by the jab and just general kind of fundamentals of boxing that is kind of clear to see Tommy was stronger. But did you feel like Jake kind of held his own and was competitive in there?
Yeah, I definitely don't think he was completely outclassed or anything.
Like,
But
do you think the like celebrations at the end were like a bit much? Like, she
yeah, 100%. Because
like,
even he said it himself. He said, you know, I'm not gonna celebrate beating Jake Paul. You know, he's a YouTuber and all this type of thing. And it was literally like, you know, he'd won the lotto. Like, do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, kind of
It was
did in a way, I
crazy
suppose.
reaction. But I know the emotions are high, and
Yeah,
it was a big fight for him. And the pressure was on, like Tyson saying you can get left in Saudi Arabia, all these type of things. Said it didn't play in his head and all this type of thing, but surely it would do. Like, if
definitely
your
pressure.
brother, the heavyweight champion, saying to you, you know, if you don't win this fight, you can fucking stay here. Like,
Yeah,
so I think it did mean a lot to him, despite what he was saying prior to the fight.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And obviously, kind of like that kind of fed into kind of, I think he pulled out of the fight 2 times previously as well. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're probably both legitimate reasons. I think the first one was like a rib injury, and the second time was visa issues getting into the US. So it did kind of feed into that Jake Paul narrative, and it could have been the easy route for Jake to take, where it's like, oh, Tommy's scared, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do this, I'm gonna keep fighting kind of Nate Diaz or someone like that, and kind of keep building this hype. And do you think maybe it was just like a step up in class too soon for Jake? Like too big a step.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe, but you know, at the end of the day, it still was a split decision. I'm not saying that the referee got it right, giving it to Jake. Probably didn't get it right, realistically. I think
Yeah.
Tommy probably clearly did win the fight, but I don't think it was, you know, a complete mismatch anyway. I think from now, he could take it as a learning experience, and he could go and improve and get better and eventually be able to compete at that type of level. But I think this could be something that could discourage him, because you know, I think he was so used to these winning ways, and he was building the hype. And I feel like that kind of hype train is a little bit off track now. So it's difficult to know where to go from here.
Would you suggest or would you recommend? Because we kind of heard Jake bringing up these excuses. He didn't feel well. He was injured in his camp leading up, and he said
Yeah,
he didn't want to make excuses, but then proceeded to make a number of
it's
excuses.
always the way, isn't it? Like,
Kind of similar to what Logan did after the KSI fight.
yeah,
Uh,
needs three
but
times.
yes,
I've been sick for the past 3 days. The first thing I did this morning was sneezed 3 times.
Fucking waffler, like.
Don't sneeze 3 times today. So funny. Uh,
Oh.
and yeah, so like, do you think would your suggestion be, if you're kind of Jake Paul's manager, he's probably his own manager realistically, but if you were kind of his advisor, would you suggest immediate rematch, which is kind of what he was touting?
Um, yeah, I probably would, because I don't think that the skill gap is so vast that he would need to go off and fight other people. Like, I think if he was to make adjustments, I don't see why he couldn't get the win over him. Like, not to say it could go the same way, and it could even look more dominant in Tommy's favor in the second time around. But I don't, like, now that he's been in there with him, he's felt the jab, and you know, I think he could make adjustments. Like, he seems dedicated to it. He doesn't, he's not doing his YouTube or anything anymore. He's just focusing on boxing. So I think if he took a few months and made the adjustments, I don't see why he couldn't compete and potentially win the next fight.
Yeah, I'd probably disagree, just in terms of, I think I'd advise him to maybe just do like a KSI fight, and go before. I think a second loss to Tommy in a row, and it looks bad. Like, it looks terrible, and just in terms of his perception and his draw power and his star power, I think he'd go fight maybe at like KSI or whatever, and I think he probably beats KSI realistically. Obviously you never know, but I think he does beat him. And then you maybe fight somebody else just to get a little bit more experience, because I think Tommy is just that little bit better, and obviously Tommy can still improve in the meantime as well. And I think it's a tough fight like that. It's tough to get around that jab. It's tough to get around. I think Tommy's probably, I know he was knocked down. It was kind of a slip, half knockdown in the last round. It's kind of definitely a knockdown, like 100%, but it was a little, like, it wasn't like a ferocious kind of,
Got off balance kind of thing.
yeah, kind of thing. Yeah, yeah. More so than a vicious hook or whatever. But yeah, I think I'd suggest him to steer clear of Tommy for the time being. Go build up your star power once again. Kind of beat KSI, beat whoever. I don't even know who you'd go to. Kind of in between that or after that. Maybe
Do you
Nate
think
Diaz.
financially speaking, more so than anything, or in a best kind of strategy to eventually beat Tommy? Is that what you mean? Like,
I think both. I think
yeah,
both.
yeah, that's a fair enough. That is a fair opinion. I just think like, yeah, I think
Like
it would be
six
hard
and
for
two,
him to,
six and two as a boxer is kind of like grim record. Like,
and two from the same guy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it depends though, because I know what you're saying. Like, I actually do agree. Like, if he went and fought KSI, I probably would get. He would win that fight. I think anyway.
yeah.
Um,
Think he beats Diaz?
God, like, it sounds mental to say, but I don't think. I think it would be tightly contested. Like,
Yeah, 100%. If Woodley's tightly contested, Diaz is probably a better boxer, definitely a better boxer than Woodley.
yeah, definitely. But
And he's you're not knocking out Nate Diaz, like that's
no,
going.
you're not. You're not. But I think like he's definitely not knocking him out. That's for sure. But I still think he could compete with him. I don't know why. I just think Nate is although he is a really good boxer, but he is kind of like sloppy at times. And I think it could actually be a close one. Funnily enough, like
100%, 100%. Yeah, and I think that's maybe the avenue to go down. Maybe kind of go like stick on those kind of UFC vets, and maybe going from like an Anderson Silva to Nate Diaz, who's younger, and kind of work your way down, and then kind of still doing those star kind of fighting these stars, but like and improving on each fight as well. I think there's been some fights where it looked like he's kind of stagnated a little bit, Jake, and not improve from one fight to the next. Like in that second Woodley fight, he wasn't great, like up until the KO, which was vicious and a lovely KO, but he wasn't like boxing that well in that fight really. And I think the occasion gets to him a little bit. He's commented on like his legs going a lot and things like this. He looked physically like he was going to get sick or something like that. He looked so nervous. Like,
it's weird, isn't it, when you think about it? Because he comes across so confident, like he doesn't give a fuck, and like himself and his brother, like they're always on this on like their eyes are always on them. So it is funny to see someone like that kind of get nervous. But like, I mean, it's understandable. Like, it's big event, and there's so many people watching it. So
yeah,
it's only natural to be a little bit nervous, I suppose.
Touching on Logan, of course, you just mentioned him there. Did you see his like mid-fight interview?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Oh man, that was comical. It was absolutely comical. I love you too, man.
Love you too.
But either come back victorious or come back on your shield. I love you, bro. I love you too, man.
Man, your man had a fucking.
That's gonna be the best clip ever. Like,
it's so funny, like, because it's just like you can even see Logan's holding himself back. He doesn't know whether to correct him or to just let it go, and he just ends up letting it go.
Yeah,
but it's so funny. Like,
but it
they
was
had a
like
chat after about it. Him and what's your man's name is
Raheem, I think, isn't it?
Radio Raheem, isn't it?
Radio Raheem.
Yeah, they had a laugh about it after, which is funny. But yeah, it's gas.
I love you too.
He was like, it was almost like he wasn't concentrating on what was being said. Like, he just heard that and was like, "Oh yeah, grand, I love you too."
Good, so good. But that was like so unprofessional as well, like mid fight as well, wasn't it? That like
it's a mental thing.
You're a bitch. All the Fury's a bitch. Oh, like
yeah,
something like.
No, yeah, it's silly kind of carry on. Like, I know obviously that's what they're like.
Kind of backfired though, because Tommy came out like a train that next round. Then after hearing that, like it kind of backfired a little bit. Like,
yeah, I mean, probably because like I mean, it would annoy me if I was in his position. Like,
yeah,
because it's just such mouthpieces. A lot of them, like, aren't they?
Did you see that Logan as well offered to fight Tommy as well?
Yeah,
which is strangely like no, Logan lost to KSI and stuff, but he did look like he's slick, like he's a bigger
he's
than
massive.
Jake.
Yeah, he is much bigger than Jake. Like, not I wouldn't say much bigger. He's a good bit bigger though.
Yeah, and like stylistically could arguably be a tougher fight for Tommy than Jake. I think there's potentially a case for that.
Yeah, no, I think he could, like, because he is that bit bigger than Jake, and probably in the reach department kind of equals Tommy a little bit more. I know Tommy has like freakishly long arms, but yeah, I think it could be, like, you just don't know. Like, I think Jake is probably a more skilled boxer. I think that's kind of, no one's going to dispute that, but he was struggling with that jab. I think Logan, being that bit much bigger, could probably compete better against someone like Tommy. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but be interesting to see.
Interesting one to keep an eye on. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I feel like for Tommy's sake as well, it's probably needs to, like, I know it's such easy money for him as well, but like for his reputation, if he wants to be this world champion, surely move on from the YouTube scene sooner rather than later. Like,
Yeah, you could argue he just makes his money and then
Yeah.
moves on to fight more like legitimate boxers. But
Probably easy money, and like which probably like if he is this world champion like potential fighter, it is easy
mm,
then like
like
realistically.
he could play that card as like, you're gonna offer me a load of money to beat up a YouTuber, like
Yeah.
why wouldn't I? And that's kind of like no one's gonna, like, I think anyone in his position would do the same.
The only fear is like, does he have that drive then to go on and be that world champion? Because yeah, these fighters in his weight class that are not getting this recognition and are driving the gym every day and are scrapping to be the best and don't have this much money, and he's kind of waking up beside Molly May and the silk sheets, and maybe
Yeah.
have that. I know Furies are kind of a bit tapped and built differently and stuff as well, so
Mm.
it's hard to kind of put your finger on it per se, but um. It is an interesting one where like maybe his perception of things is like morphed because of these fights, and like maybe he keeps going and fights KSI and fights whoever, like it's an interesting one, like what avenue he takes himself.
Yeah, it is hard because like you look at like Tyson, obviously he's, I know he's heavyweight champion and stuff, obviously mega rich, but he still comes in looking like so good every fight. So
Yeah,
you could say that if he's cut from the same cloth as him, he can still compete and he can still find that fire in him, regardless of the money and the fame or whatever. But he's his own individual, so he could be that case where, as you say, he could just go fight a few YouTubers, make his money, and his missus is making loads of money as well. And he can never compete with the kind of the hungry young top guys.
interesting. I know Eddie Hearn like commented on it, being like before the fight he was like Tommy should be putting him away and Jake's like an average boxer and stuff, and
Mm.
he kind of said after it like the difference is like, but like Tommy's not like world class by any stretch, and
Yeah,
it's hard, like yeah, like you'd imagine any world class fighter worth their kind of anything puts kind of Jake away, or at the very least a very very one sided dominant
yeah.
decision. So yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't even think a world class boxer would get dropped by Jake. And I know you say like slip off balance, but like looking at it, like he landed a stiff jab and it put him off his feet. So like the way I would look at that is just, yeah, he got knocked down. I just feel like, I know it can happen to anyone, but I feel like a world class boxer wouldn't happen to them.
yeah, no, certainly an interesting debate, and I'm sure it's not the last we will be discussing of this kind of whole YouTube influencer,
Yeah.
whatever boxer thing on the channel. And I'm sure we'll be just touching on it again in the future. But yeah, interesting debate. Thanks very much for that, Dave. Enjoyed that.
Yeah. Cheers, bro.
If you did enjoy the video, make sure to drop a like on it down below. It is much appreciated. And please do subscribe. Obviously, still very early days in the channel, so all your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Catch you in a bit.
Cheers, guys.